Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Vader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had a chance to speak with Vic Wilson. He is the head of sales and marketing at voestalpine Böhler Welding. Vic and I had a great conversation. We talked a lot about that, welding industry. He's had this opportunity to both work on the distributor side, both large corporate and independent, and also on the manufacturing side, and even did a stint in the welding cooperative world. So, he's got this whole 360-degree view of the industry, and it really kind of gives him a unique perspective, I would say, about how these relationships work with one another and some of the challenges that they're facing today. So I had a great conversation with him, and I really hope you enjoy the episode. This episode was brought to you by my friends at Profit2. A couple of years ago, I was introduced to Profit2 through a client who had been working with them for over a year. This client had been struggling with improving gross margins and was looking for a service to help them recapture some of their lost opportunities. Through their work with Profit2, it took about a year, but they were able to bump their gross margins by almost 2 points. For this distributor, and frankly for anyone in the business, this margin enhancement was a big deal. Beyond the pricing service, Profit2 has started helping clients look at cost and rebate management. If you want to discover hidden margin opportunities, come take a look at what Profit2 can do for you. Learn more at www.profit2.com. That's profit with a number 2. And be sure to let them know you heard about them on the Distribution Talk podcast. Well, hey, Vic, welcome to Distribution Talk. Thanks for taking the time to be with me.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate you asking me to be on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you know, one of the things I love to dive into, being an origin story junkie that I am, tell me a little bit about your background and kind of, what got you into this wonderful world of distribution.
Yeah, so going back to the very beginning of the 90s, I had actually been working in the carpentry industry of all things.
Okay.
And where I lived, I'm from Canada. I'm a Canadian. I immigrated here about 10 years ago. And I went to work up north. And of course, in Canada, it's hard to do construction when you're under 6 feet of snow.
Very true.
So,
sure.
I got laid off in the winter months, and I went to church. And the guy who I sat with quite often in church, where I work for Liquid Carbonic, which is a large distributor of industrial gases in Canada. And he said, I got an opening, just come try it out. And
sure,
I'm a super, super competitive guy. If I lose a tiddlywinks, like I'm upset. Like that's the kind of guy I am, right?
Sure.
And, so I got into the role, and, it's what they say in our industry is, in the welding, at least the welding distribution industry, is once you're sucked in, there's no getting out. And it's true. I've been here for almost 35 years doing this.
Yeah.
So I got drug into it, and I never looked back. It's a rich industry, and it's been really great for my career.
Tell me a little bit about, once you got involved with that distributor, how long did you stay with them? And then did you, kind of move on to some other things?
Yeah, I started with Liquid Carbonic. I went to the merger with Liquid Carbonic and Praxair in the 1997. So I spent a grand total of about 11 years with them in total. And I did everything from driving truck, right, to then inside sales and eventually outside sales. And then I left at that point to go further my career, and I moved to another community, which was better for my family at the time. And I went to work for an independent welding distributor.
Okay.
I worked for them for about a year and a half, 2 years, and then I got a call from another distributor that really wanted to progress. And the people they had in-house were not the ones that were really being able to make that happen. They didn't have the industry connections and everything else. So I made the jump to go over there. And then after a year working there, I became a partner in the business. I bought into the business. I took over running the business, and I did that for 15 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I took my small independent distributor in Edmonton, Alberta, from I think we did 700,000 in the first year. And it's a 10-year mark where we're doing 11 million.
Oh, fantastic, man. Well done. Yeah. I'm a big fan of Edmonton, by the way. You know, I really, I love it up there. You know, I've worked with several clients there and I just kind of have a soft spot for the area. But if I could, let's go back to, you know, when you moved over to this distributor, you said you're a highly competitive guy. So in
Yes.
distribution, in the welding space, you know, gas is king and supplies are, you know, kind of a very distant second.
When working for the national companies, yes, that was very much the way it was. They really want you to push gas. The hard goods portion of the business was, I mean, it was there. Was it important? Yes, to a degree. But obviously, you know, the margin wise, gases make significantly higher margins. When you're manufacturing them yourself, of course, that just proposes it even further so that you get more margins. But, you know, even in those days, Praxair was already building their own private labels and, you know, going out to foreign countries to buy product so they could increase their margins. So it wasn't something we didn't concentrate on, because we always say that, you know, the gases pays the bills and the hard goods are the necessary evil.
Gotcha.
But then when I went to move my own company, it was a lot different because I'm not as powerful as those national companies. You know, I made a lot of relationships quickly in the industry because I realized that the welding industry is really, really centered around relationships. I've got a ton of friends in this industry from, you know, being out there, talking with people, helping people when they needed help, and then asking for help for myself when I needed it. And I can tell you that at that point, you know, a healthy distributor in our industry is 60% gas, 40% hard goods. The national companies will typically be 85, 15.
Right, absolutely.
You know, yeah, they're very much the other way. But for us, hard goods was an important part of our business because we had to play on somebody else's brand, right? I have my own local community distributor that, you know, my competitors are known nationally, globally. Nobody knew who my business was in Edmonton, Alberta.
Right.
I need to, you know, rely on those relationships of the distributors. So, yeah.
So again, you know, coming from the big kid out there and then coming into your own independent distribution, how did you share that mentality with your salespeople? Because I think it would be very attractive for salespeople to go after gas. You know, it's higher margin, probably, you know, the compensation side might be a little bit better. But how did you help them find the balance?
Well, you know, it's, in my opinion, it's whatever you can use to stick your foot in the door. You know, so sometimes, you know, the opportunity lies with a product that somebody else has difficulty with. And so we got really good at supplying the difficult stuff. And then once you've earned your stripes and you've earned your way in and they trust you as a vendor or as a distributor to them, you know, they'll open up a little further. You know, I have a story from years ago where I met an end user and I walked in. He looked at my business card. He literally dropped it in the mud and he squished it in with his boot. And I smiled at him and I said, yeah. And I said, awesome, nice, thanks. I'll see you next week. And I went and saw him next week. And I saw him week after week after week. And then eventually all I wanted to do is, he said, why you keep coming back here? I said, I just want a chance to prove myself. And so what do? We started selling him tip cleaners for a cutting torch, like a $3 item. Right. But you know what? You kept showing up, you kept proving yourself. And eventually when the other people fall down, you know, so I started with a contact or a tip cleaner. And eventually I had an $800,000 a year account because I worked it backwards. And these guys, you know, you learn that on our part of the industry, knowledge is king. And that's what I teach my people quite often, is that knowledge is where you're really going to make the impact for the customer. Anybody can sell a price. Anybody can sell a availability. But if you can sell on caring about somebody's business to the point where, you know, did it cost a lot of money to drive out to this customer to sell them a tip cleaner? Absolutely, it did. Yeah. But the long-term play is that I'm eventually going to get all of your business, and I'm going to prove to you why you want to do business with me and my company.
And I think honestly, Vic, I mean, that is so prevalent. I mean, that is really something that is used in all aspects, especially the construction related industries. I mean, I think you go in there and you should not expect to get the lion's share. I mean, it's really, what can I do to take it? Growing up in the contractor supply space, I used to tell people, just look around that job shack for broken tools and just say, hey, look, I'm going to handle this for you, and really just be good at that. That's your in, or whatever's on back order, I will find it for you. And I will, I will move mountains to find that. And that's kind of how you earn your stripes, is really doing the things the other people don't want to do or cannot do well.
Yeah. And for us, we eventually progressed that to what in our company we ended up calling it a 24-hour guarantee. But I took a full year and I went and saw every customer in my community, whether they were my customer or not, as the owner. And I went in and said, what are the top 5 things you like about me and my company? What's the top 5 things you like about my competitor? And what's the one thing that really, really you need every day without fail? And it came down to, it wasn't price, it wasn't products, it was getting the stuff when you needed it. They would tell you that I've got 40 or 50 welders working here, and if they don't have the product, that cost runs up really high, really fast.
Sure.
So what we did is we did a 9-month analysis on that, and then we spent the next 3 months building policies and procedures and things in-house so that we could make sure that we adhered to our guarantee. And our guarantee was simple. If you ordered at 2:00, you'd get it by 2:00 the next day, or we would tell you where you should go get it. Because at the end of the day, you have to care about your customer, right? Your customers are not going to sit and wait for you to deliver something 3 weeks from now. They have people need it today. And if somebody else can help them, then I'll help them, because they'll come back to me.
Right. No, I think that's absolutely brilliant. I've had several clients with really good luck with, specific guarantees, putting their money where their mouth is. And I think that's incredibly important out there. So you ran this, this independent distributor. You bought in, ran it for a number of years, got to, approximately, you said 11 million. And then what happened then?
I had a falling out with my business partner.
Okay. Well, it happens.
And,
trust me.
It happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I put a word out to my friends in industry that, I think it's time for me to move on. And one of my friends was called by a recruiter, and he said, you know what, you should, would you like the job? And he says, no, but I got somebody to be really good for you. And so I get a call in Canada to come down to Colorado to live in the US. And so after about a month of negotiating back and forth, I got all my documents together and I moved to Colorado. And I worked for a company called Forney Industries. And I helped them. I initially went there to help them lower their costs on their goods. And the game plan was that it was supposed to take about 2 or 3 years. But while I was in my own business, I started reaching out overseas on my own. To start importing products to be able to lower my costs to get gas margins on hard goods. Because ultimately that's what's, you want to get those margins up.
Sure.
So
Absolutely.
I went to work for them. After about 6-8 months, I'd lowered all their costs for them until they moved me into their product management. And I helped them start an industrial side of their business, and then helped them redesign their welding equipment line.
Nice. Yeah. Good. And you were able to introduce, some of those relationships that you had created overseas.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. A lot of international sourcing.
Gotcha. And how long were you with them?
About 5 years.
Okay.
And then I moved from there. I moved to the Independent Welding Distributors Cooperative.
Yes, the IWDC.
IWDC. Something that my company had been a member of. I valued the co-op. The co-op was such a help. The people not only the people that work there, but the fellow members. It's so amazing how you get these people together and you get into a room and, you can be competitors, but you're still looking across each other and say, how can I help you?
Yeah.
And these people are so awesome to me. They're a big part of the reason why my business grew as quickly as it does. It was like having my own group of mentors, because as my business is growing, I'm in my 30s. I don't know much yet, but these people have had generational businesses were helping me, and it was awesome.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of cooperatives. In fact, I was speaking at one earlier this week, and I enjoy the camaraderie, and I think there's a much tighter connection in the cooperative than in a trade association, for example. That's just been my observation over the years.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different philosophy, right? In a
It
cooperative,
is.
you all have a share, and you all get to, share in the positives and the negatives. So
Hmm.
yeah, so I wanted to work there because I wanted to give back, right, to
Okay.
my fellow members that had all helped me. And
Yeah.
so it was awesome for me to get to go work for the cooperative. They're great people, and their members are amazing.
So how was that transition though? I'm curious because I've never worked, for a cooperative. I mean, I obviously have spoken and do a little cursory stuff, but yeah, I mean, you're basically now, working with both sides of the supply chain there, both sides of the fence, and really kind of managing relationships between those two.
Yeah, I mean, one of the difficult parts is you have 140 bosses,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
can't please everybody all the time. So that was a bit tricky for me.
Yeah.
I'm a very progressive person. Like I said, I'm very competitive. So I want progressive. I want to push and move things forward. And,
Right.
to center cut out of the middle of the membership, who you can help, because obviously there's people who do $1 million a year, and there's probably people who do 100 million a year. And
Right.
helping the $100 million people, which is beneficial, but they got to 100 million for a reason, right?
Uh-huh.
So being able to help everybody equally was difficult. The other
Yeah.
part is that if you're a competitive person, you've been in that market your entire time, going to a cooperative, it's a service industry now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Cooperative's not in the welding industry.
Right.
It's a entity that services the welding industry.
That's
And,
correct.
for me, that was bit of a struggle to transition into that,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm progressive. I want to move everybody forward, right? And
Right.
some
Right.
people want to go forward, and some people are like, no,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want any part of that. So it's great for everybody as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also, if working there, at least it's difficult when you want to push everybody forward and not
Yeah.
everybody wants to go along with you.
Right, right. And that happens in independent distribution, or you acquire a company, and not everybody's going to make that change, and not going to be able to work at the same pace that you do. Yeah,
Yeah.
as you go in there. So,
And
yeah,
my boss Frank Kasanik had a great saying, and it's, once you met one independent distributor, you've met one independent distributor.
that's it. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's
You
that's a
know,
great point, man. Yeah, for
uh,
sure, for sure. So you stayed at the cooperative for a little while, and then ultimately wound your way back to manufacturing again.
yeah, I'm the kind of guy that likes to run around with his hair on fire.
Yeah.
And so I took a new challenge. I now work for voestalpine Böhler Welding USA. We're
Mm-hmm.
a filler metal company. I came to this company because it's got an amazing product line, some of the best in the industry. Nobody's ever been, doubted our ability. But
Mm-hmm.
from a company standpoint, we needed some assistance to further ourselves in the market. So I came for a new challenge.
Okay. And again, though, you've been in those shoes before. It's not like it was a brand new set of shoes. So I suspect that you were able to hit the ground running.
Yeah, for sure. We made a lot of changes. Honestly, the first one we made was a culture change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Culture is very important in this day and age. And, you know, distributors want their vendors to be their partners and to
Yeah.
assist them and to help them grow. And when we got here, we weren't like that.
Mm-hmm.
But a year later, we're very much like that. We hold customer centricity meetings where we talk about how we can always put the customer at the center of everything that we do as an organization. And we hold those meetings monthly.
This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by InSequel Distribution Software. InSequel is a fully functional distribution-based software package. I only recommend software packages that were purpose-built to serve distribution, and these folks do it very well at a price point many smaller distributors can afford. Economy doesn't mean compromise. This company is on the cutting edge of distribution-friendly applications like VMI on mobile devices, mobile signature capture, mobile CRM, warehouse management software, and e-commerce development. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than InSequel Distribution Software at www.insequel.com. That's INXSQL.com. Something you and I had talked about before, with some of the demand of the distributors changed, kind of asking the supplier to do more and more and more for them. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. The one thing I noticed is that 15 years ago, when you walked into a welding distributor, at least, the warehouse would be full of product, top to bottom, front to back, right? Because that was your value proposition back then. It was, I got it when you need it and my price is fair. What I think I've seen over the last decade is that the distributors now rely on the supplier now to carry all the inventory because they don't want to carry inventory any longer. They expect us to rebate them, do training, to ultimately do sales calls on their behalf, and to warehouse it for them. I understand in some cases, the national distributors have gone overseas. They've lowered their costs. They can now go to larger end users and offer significantly lower pricing, which now puts a lot of downward pressure on independent distributors. It makes it very difficult for them. But from our side, it makes it difficult on us as well because I have holding costs. I have all these additional costs. And, you almost get to a point where you have to start saying, like, if you're not going to stock it, you're not going to try to sell it, and you want me to pay you rebates on it, why do I have a distributor?
Right. Right. I mean, a lot of the value proposition on your side, when you look at having independent distribution, it is eroding.
Yeah. From my perspective, I'll never go direct on them because I've spent so much time as an independent distributor. But
totally understand.
I do know that a lot of my competitors do that. And, it erodes trust. And again, I keep coming back to trust. And, if we don't have trust with the distributor, of course, they're not going to. Why would I warehouse somebody if you're going to go around me? Why would I take you into places if you're going to go around me?
Right.
So from our perspective, it's a value proposition for us to say, we're still going to make the end user calls and we're still going to, work the sales back through distribution, but it becomes more and more difficult. And you end up with it makes it very difficult for a company like ours to grow because you'll go into a customer, an end user, and you'll find out they're already dealing directly with one of my competitors.
Yeah, it is difficult. And I do appreciate that you all will not, sell direct and go around them. We consider that on the distributor side, of course, we just consider that distribution heresy. When people go around and do that, I mean, it's just, that's like the third rail. But yes, a lot of your contemporaries out there, your competitors out there, they're trying to figure out how to really make it work on their side as well. I mean, it can't be just one way. And I think that is a very fair statement, that when you enter into these sit downs, kind of like you will be at this IWDC meeting, coming up, that's got to be something you all talk about and talk about it freely between the two of them. Hey, both of us, this can't just be good for you all. It has to be good for us too.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when I sit down with distributors today, it is I'm looking for partners. I don't want a buy-sell relationship. I'm not trying to set everybody and their dog up. I want to have partners that are going to work with me in an area and help me grow. So from our perspective, it is I'll have that kind of conversation with them and they'll go, well, I'm not sure. I'm afraid it'll do this or afraid to do that. It's like, my answer is like, hey, that's no problem. It's no problem at all. I just have to go down the street to a different distributor.
Right.
Okay. Right. Because I still have to sell something. I still have a job to do. I need to get my product in front of people. And so, quite often that makes the distributor stop for a second and go, oh, okay, he's serious about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
He really wants to be my partner. And we've in the last year gained some, regained some great relationships. My sales team is working very diligently on working through distribution and, helping the distributors win in the marketplace. And as you do that more and more, you get more and more trust, which I keep talking about. And eventually you end up to the point where they trust you enough to say, yeah, you're going to be my true partner. And as long as we continue to act like a partner, then everything will go well. And partners, I always say, make a friend, make a sale. A friend will never leave you.
Right.
And, ultimately at the end of the day, we need to make lots of friends here and support the people that are going to help us move to the next level. And we move up together, what's the saying? A raising tide raises all ships, right?
Right. Right. No, and I'm a big believer in that. I think, just as you were saying, talking about that, I was thinking one of the challenges is something that has to be challenging for you all. And I suspect it's all for all manufacturers is when you have, a regime change, you have a new, a next generation coming in, or it could be, just again, a change of ownership of these independent distribution companies. It feels like you have to start all over again on this. partnership philosophy sometimes.
Sometimes my philosophy is that in business, there's only two people. There's influencers and decision makers.
Okay.
And so, when you're in a business, you have to talk to the front counter because they're an influencer.
Right.
You have to talk to the next generation because they're an influencer and sometimes a little bit of a decision maker still.
Right.
But eventually that person will become the decision maker. So my philosophy is that you need to be able to have relationships with every level inside of a distributor, which is why, again, you go back to the partner. When I look at the national companies that are out there that have over 1,000 locations, can I do that kind of stuff with my 26 salespeople? No, right? I can't do that. I can't be everywhere all the time. So I'm better to choose a partner, somebody that wants to work with me. And I'll know the owner. I'll know their children if they're in the business.
Right.
I'll know the purchasing. I'll know the sales. I'll know every level of sales. I don't know everybody in the organization. Either myself or my sales team will know these people. Because if you don't, to your point, you end up in a scenario where, something's changed and I'm on the outside looking in, and somebody else might have already been building and working on that relationship for years with the next generation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Vic, one of the things I do is I spend some time working with manufacturers representatives and how to sell into distribution. And the thing that I tend to make sure they understand is that independent distributors like to promote from within. And so if you're not speaking with all those levels, as you just described, you're going to get into a position where you're going to be on the outside looking in because somebody else took the time to make those relationships and watch these folks progress through these organizations.
Yes, for sure. Or on the flip side of that is that you get somebody that's moving up an organization and then gets an opportunity with another company altogether. And now you may not be doing anything with that distributor, and all of a sudden you've got a leg up because you've already got the relationship. The way I view it is that you're starting 5 or 6 sales calls in already. If it takes that 5 or 6 sales calls to finally get somebody to trust you're coming back, you're going to say what you're going to do and all that good stuff. And so having somebody go there is like, okay, well, I catapulted 3 months ahead in discussions because that person already knows me, they trust me, they know what I'm capable of.
Yeah. So if I could take a little bit of a segue here, I wanted to touch on this. And again, this is something you and I have spoken about before, but, some of the tariff challenges that we're seeing, and obviously being Canadian, you've got a little bit of skin in the game there as well. So tell me a little bit about what's going on in the welding space, the welding supply chain there. How is this affecting these relationships?
At our company, we're very fortunate, kind of, if you want to call it that. But we got tariffed in 2018 on our materials for the most part. So when the new tariffs were implemented, we already had them. We'd had them for the last 7 years.
Sure.
So from our perspective, it's been not quite as bad. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly, the industry right now is taking a step back and waiting for everything to settle out, waiting for the dust to settle before somebody makes a decision. Unlike 2018, when the tariffs came out, everybody panicked and forward bought as much as they could find anywhere they could find it. We're not finding that as much this time, but the difference this time is that everything's affected. Nobody gets out alive.
Right. There's no sacred cows out there.
No. And what it does for distributors, though, and if they really look at it, the people that said, well, I'm made in America, who suddenly have a price increase. The question is, well, why do you have a price increase if you're made in America, right? And, the reality of it is that this country is very reliant on outside countries for materials, whether it be raw materials or finished goods. The last time when it happened, a lot of people moved stuff out of China and they moved it to other countries. Now President Trump has closed that loop on everybody, so now everybody's affected, which in my world just leveled the playing field, in my perspective on it. And then, of course, they went after the reciprocal tariffs, which is basically a blanket statement to say we're going to get everything else. So from a volume standpoint, really, I'd say maybe 35% of our products were affected by these tariffs this time. But I know for my competitors, a lot of them saw a lot of increases. And obviously, I don't think this is going away. Personally, I think this is, I saw somebody the other day talking about the fact that the federal government has a $67 trillion spend and only $44 trillion intake from the public. So they've got to close that gap somehow. And this is just their way of looking at it.
This is a way to look at that. So,
Yeah.
all right. No, I appreciate that. And obviously, you've had you understand this pretty well. And not only being in Canada, but then, in your independent company, you were sourcing quite a bit. And so you can really, you saw this whole thing.
Yeah, you get pretty intimately involved with the HTS codes. You know very well what code goes to what, so you understand it. So you're looking ahead all the time. When you hear about things like changes, are there other options that I can go to that has a different HTS code so I can possibly lower my risk or impact? This time it was very wide sweeping, so there's no getting out.
Before we wrap up, I did want to transition real quickly over to talking about giving back to the industry. And I know you did that originally when you moved to the co-op. That was kind of part of your beginning of the giving back. But, now since you're on the manufacturing side again, you're continuing to give back to the industry. Could you share a little bit about what you've been doing?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, before I even went to work for the co-op, my company, I was on a committee at that point, the marketing committee for the IWDC. I always feel like it's, one, you're always in the knowledge, right? So you're always in the know of what's going on when you sit on committees. So from my own company's perspective, it made sense for me to be ahead of the curve, know what's happening, what's going on. And at the same time, giving back to those people that help. Again, this is a relationship industry. Working for the cooperative was just another form of giving back to be able to help all those. And today I sit on GATA's Industry Partnering Council, and that's our way of how do we give investment, or how do we give a return on investment for those members of the association from putting on the shows that they do, and make sure that we add value for all distributors and vendors that attend the programs. And it's awesome to be able to sit with these people and come up with ideas to further everybody, not just distributors, but the vendors as well. It's awesome how we can get together as a group and come up with best practices and then implement them.
Vic, I think, you've had 35 years in this, around this industry. I mean, you've picked up a trick or two. And I think it's important to be able to share that, especially with people coming up, not only in the, organizations, the boards and the committees and things like that, but to be able to find ways to bring others up.
Yeah, I'd find it's both directions. The younger generation comes and looks at people like myself and say, I teach a lot of people who work for me. But then I go to these conferences and I listen to these next generation kids. I call them kids, but they're in their 20s.
Oh, I call them kids too. I know. It's a bad habit. So.
But, they're teaching me about the way this industry is changing and, the switch to e-commerce and how important that's become, and, educating us older guys on what we're missing out on. And I pride myself on keeping up on the forefront of that kind of stuff, but not everybody does that. So if I can give advice, it's, there's no such thing as a crazy idea. Listen to everybody, the next generation knows way more than we do about their generation and what's important to their customers. And you're going to see the next 10 years as people like myself that have got a wealth of knowledge leave the industry. We really need to take the time to mentor the people below us to help further this industry along so it doesn't get taken over by AI.
So Vic, hey, I'm just looking at time here, and I think we better wrap this bad boy up today. But it's been such a pleasure. I really appreciate you taking the time to, share your journey with me and share a couple thoughts. So, again, thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you, Jason. It's been awesome. Always willing to help out everybody. So anytime you need help, just let me know.
Good. Well, and I look forward to seeing you late June if you're going to be at that IWDC meeting.
Absolutely. Wouldn't miss it. For sure.
Right.
We'll be there.
Perfect. All right, Vic. Well, take care. And again, thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider sharing with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to follow the show on your favorite podcast application. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by the brilliant team at the Creative Impostor Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, the Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.